The moment Mark Lewis's hand shot up in warning, the entire hall went silent. His eyes had shifted to that dangerous amber gold, the kind that meant someone was about to bleed. And standing between him and Alpha Lester Hall was a girl who shouldn't have been there at all. A maid, a nobody, a human-blooded Omega named Renee Thorpe, who'd been scrubbing floors in the palace for 3 months without anyone noticing her existence. Until tonight. Until Lester touched her wrist to move her aside, and the Alpha King lost every shred of control he'd been clinging to. You could feel it in the air. That electric charge before lightning strikes. That moment when instinct overrides reason, and a wolf claims what it believes is his. Renee was pressed against Lester's back now, her fingers trembling as they gripped his armor, her breath coming in short. Panicked bursts. She had no idea what she'd just triggered. No idea that the most powerful alpha in the Northern Kingdoms had been watching her for weeks. Wanting her. Fighting it. And now, with another alpha's scent on her skin, all that restraint had shattered like glass. Mark's voice came out low and lethal. "Step away from her, Lester! Now!" Lester didn't move. His own wolf was rising, responding to the challenge, to the dominance radiating off Mark like heat from a furnace. "She's a servant, Mark. She was in my way. I didn't realize moving a maid required your permission. You touched her. I moved her. You touched her." The growl that followed wasn't human. It was all wolf, all alpha, all rage, wrapped in a veneer of control that was fraying with every second. Renee felt it vibrate through her bones. Felt the way her body responded instinctively, wanting to submit, to run, to do anything but stand there, caught between two predators circling each other. "Renee." Mark's eyes locked on hers, and the gold in them softened just a fraction. Just enough for her to see the man beneath the wolf. "Come here!" It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in silk, the kind an alpha gives when he's offering protection and demanding obedience in the same breath. But her feet wouldn't move, because crossing that space meant acknowledging what everyone in the hall was already whispering, that the Alpha King wanted his maid. Lester's voice was quieter now, but no less dangerous. "You're making a scene, Mark, over a girl who's not even pack. She's mine." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Lester went still. Renee stopped breathing. Because those 2 words changed everything. In their world, an alpha didn't claim lightly, didn't use that word unless he meant it in every way that mattered. And Mark had just claimed her in front of the entire royal court. "Mine," Mark repeated, softer this time, meant only for her. "You've been mine since the moment you walked into this palace. I've tried to fight it, tried to ignore it, but I'm done pretending." Lester finally stepped aside, his expression unreadable. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes with that claim, brother, because the council won't accept a human-blooded Omega as your mate, and neither will half the packs under your rule." Mark didn't look away from Renee as she slowly crossed the space between them. Just kept his eyes on her, tracking every step, every breath, until she was close enough to touch. And then his hand came up, gentle this time, cupping her face with a tenderness that didn't match the violence still simmering in his gaze. "Let me worry about the council," he said softly. "Right now, all that matters is that you're safe." But Renee knew better. Being claimed by an Alpha King came with a target on your back. And as Mark's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, as his scent wrapped around her like a claiming in itself, she realized that her quiet, invisible life was over. The question was whether she'd survive what came next. 3 months earlier, Renee Thorpe had arrived at the palace with nothing but a letter of recommendation and a desperate need to disappear. She wasn't running from anything dramatic, just the suffocating weight of being Omega in a world that valued strength above all else. Her mother had been human. Her father had been a low-ranking wolf who died before Renee was born, and she'd spent her entire life being reminded that she was less, weaker, not worth noticing, which was exactly why she'd applied to work in the palace, because nobody noticed the servants. It was invisible work, and Renee had gotten very good at being invisible. The palace itself was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. All stone and history and power, perched on the edge of the northern mountains. And at the center of it all was Alpha King Mark Lewis. She'd seen him on her first day, had been carrying linens through the east corridor when he'd passed with his council, his presence so commanding that she'd pressed herself against the wall instinctively, head down, trying to be invisible. But she'd felt his gaze, felt the weight of it like a physical touch. She'd told herself it meant nothing. She'd been wrong, because Mark had noticed her, had caught her scent in that moment, something soft and unfamiliar among the sharp wolf musk that filled the palace. And in the weeks that followed, he'd found reasons to walk the corridors where she worked, never speaking, never approaching, just watching with those storm-gray eyes that saw too much. It was Lila, one of the other maids, who'd finally said something. "The king's been asking about you. Everyone's noticed. He watches you." Lila's eyes had been bright with curiosity and warning. "Be careful, Renee. Alphas like him don't play games. If he wants you, he'll take you." But that was the thing about Mark. He could have commanded her presence at any time, could have summoned her to his chambers and demanded whatever he wanted. But he didn't. Instead, he waited, watched, as if her choice actually mattered to him. It made everything more complicated, because power she could resist, force she could endure. But patience? Restraint from someone who didn't have to show it? That was infinitely more dangerous. The night everything changed had started like any other. Renee had been assigned to serve at a diplomatic dinner. She'd been told to stay in the background, to keep glasses filled without drawing attention. It should have been simple. But Lester Hall had arrived with his delegation from the Western Territories. He was Mark's younger brother by a different mother, raised in a different pack, with different ambitions. Where Mark's power was controlled and steady, Lester's was wild and unpredictable. Renee had been refilling wine glasses when Lester's hand had caught her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her movement. She'd frozen, trained by years of submission to not challenge an alpha's touch. But then Mark had been there, moving faster than she'd thought possible. His presence a wall of fury between her and Lester. And everything had spiraled from there. The confrontation, the claim, the moment when her invisible life had ended and something terrifying and exhilarating had begun. Now, standing in Mark's private chambers, where he'd brought her after the scene in the Great Hall, Renee didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. The room was massive, all dark wood and stone, with windows that overlooked the mountains. It smelled like him, pine and earth and something wild. Mark was pacing, his formal jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He hadn't spoken since they'd entered, and the silence was suffocating. "You had no right," Renee finally said, her voice steadier than she felt, "to claim me like that, to announce it in front of everyone without even asking." "I had every right." Mark stopped pacing, turned to face her. "You're my mate, Renee. I knew it the moment I scented you. And I've spent 3 months trying to fight it, trying to convince myself I could let you go. But watching Lester touch you?" His eyes flashed gold again. "I would have torn him apart if he hadn't stepped back. I'm not your mate. I'm a maid. I'm nobody. Don't." The single word was sharp enough to cut. Mark closed the distance between them, his hands braced on either side of her head, caging her in. But not threatening, protective, almost. "Don't ever call yourself nobody. I don't care what your bloodline is or what rank you were born into. The bond between us is real. You feel it. I know you do." She did. God help her, she did. Had felt it every time he passed her in the corridors. Every time her weak, quiet wolf had recognized his strength and yearned toward it like a plant seeking sunlight. But feeling it and accepting it were two different things. "The council will never accept me," she whispered. "My pack will accept what I tell them to accept. And the council answers to me, not the other way around. His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture so gentle it made her throat tight. I know this is fast. I know I should have courted you properly, given you time. But Lester's presence changes things. He's here because he wants my throne. And he'll use you to get to me if he figures out how much you mean to me. I don't mean anything to you. You don't even know me. I know you're brave, strong, even if you don't see it. I know you take care of the other servants when they're overwhelmed. That you leave extra food in the kitchens for the Omega pups, who are always hungry. I know you read late at night in your quarters. His voice softened. I know you, Renee. Maybe not everything yet, but enough to know I'm not letting you go. The certainty in his voice should have terrified her, but instead, it settled something restless inside her. Made her feel, for the first time in her life, like maybe she wasn't alone. What happens now? She asked. Mark's smile was small, tired. Now I figure out how to keep you safe while half the kingdom tries to tear us apart. Now I teach you what it means to be an alpha's mate. And now, his thumb brushed across her lower lip, sending electricity down her spine. Now I spend every moment trying to earn the trust I claimed by force. The first lesson in being an alpha king's mate, Renee learned, was that privacy became a luxury. Mark had assigned 2 guards to shadow her movements, wolves from his personal pack, who looked at her with a mix of respect and suspicion. The second lesson was that the palace operated on power dynamics she'd never had to navigate before. The servants who'd once been her equals now treated her differently, some with deference, others with barely concealed resentment. And the wolves of the court? They watched her like she was a puzzle to solve or a threat to eliminate. Lester was the worst of them. He didn't leave after the dinner. Instead, he'd requested guest quarters, claiming diplomatic business that required an extended stay. And everywhere Renee went, she felt his gaze tracking her. Not with Mark's intensity, but with something colder, more calculating. It was 4 days after the claiming that he cornered her in the library. Renee had thought she was alone when his voice came from behind her. Does he know you're afraid of him? She spun, heart hammering. Lester was leaning against one of the shelves, arms crossed, expression mild. But his wolf was there in his eyes, curious and dangerous. I'm not afraid of Mark, she said. No? Lester pushed off the shelf, moved closer. You should be. He's the strongest alpha in 3 generations, more wolf than man most days. And he's decided you're his, which means every enemy he has will come for you eventually. That's terrifying, Renee. You'd be smart to be afraid. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you. His smile was genuine, which somehow made it worse. You're not like the other wolves here. You're not playing games or angling for power. You're just trying to survive. And I think my brother's going to get you killed. Renee's throat tightened. He said he'd protect me. He'll try. But Mark has responsibilities that go beyond you. A kingdom to run, packs to manage, threats from outside our borders and inside our own territory. How long do you think he can focus on keeping one Omega safe when all of that is demanding his attention? Lester's voice was soft, almost kind. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Then what do you suggest? Leave, tonight. I'll help you. Give you money, safe passage to wherever you want to go. You can start over, have a real life instead of being a target. For a moment, Renee was tempted. Because Lester was right about one thing. She was in over her head. Had gone from invisible to the center of palace intrigue in a matter of days. Why would you help me? She asked carefully. Because watching Mark lose control over a woman makes him vulnerable. And if you're gone, he can focus on being the alpha king this kingdom needs. Lester's expression shifted, became harder. He's my brother, Renee. I don't want to see him destroy himself over a mate bond he can't afford. Before Renee could respond, a growl echoed through the library. Mark stepped out of the shadows near the door, and the fury radiating off him was palpable. He must have been there the entire time, listening. "You need to stop talking," Mark said quietly. "Right now, Lester. Before I forget we're family." Lester didn't look intimidated. "I'm trying to help you." "By convincing my mate to abandon me? By telling her she's not safe with me?" Mark's voice was deadly calm. "You've been here 4 days, and you've already tried to undermine my claim twice. There won't be a third time." "Because you're making her doubt me. Making her think I can't protect what's mine." Mark's eyes were full gold now, his wolf barely contained. "You've always wanted what I have. The throne, the power, the respect. But you will not have her." Lester held his brother's gaze for a long moment, then laughed softly. "You really do care about her." "I wondered if it was just the mate bond talking, but no. You actually care. That's unfortunate." "Get out." "Gladly." Lester moved toward the door, paused next to Renee. "The offer stands if you change your mind." Then he was gone, and Renee was alone with Mark and the tension vibrating in the air between them. She expected anger, but instead, Mark just looked tired. "He's not wrong," he said finally. "Being with me is dangerous. There are wolves who will see you as a weakness to exploit, and I can't be with you every moment, as much as I want to be. So what do? We fight, we adapt, and we trust each other." Mark crossed to her, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "I'm not going to lie to you, Renee. This is going to be hard, harder than anything you've faced before. But I will protect you. With everything I have. You just have to trust me enough to let me." Renee searched his eyes, saw the sincerity there, the desperate need for her to believe him, and beneath her fear, she felt the mate bond, that inexplicable pull toward Mark that had nothing to do with reason and everything to do with recognition. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." The relief that flooded Mark's expression was almost painful to witness. His forehead pressed against hers, and for a moment they just stood there, breathing the same air, letting the bond between them settle into something solid and real. "Thank you," he murmured, "for giving me a chance. I won't waste it." "Listen, I know this is intense. Renee's entire world just shifted, and she's standing at the edge of something that could destroy her or transform her completely. If you're feeling this story in your chest, if you need to know whether Mark can actually protect her, or if Lester's warning is going to come true, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what's coming next will change everything. There are secrets buried in this palace, threats circling closer, and a truth about Renee herself that nobody sees coming. Don't miss what happens next. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. Mark was teaching her what it meant to stand beside an alpha, which involved everything from combat training to understanding pack politics. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, and Renee found herself changing, growing stronger, more confident, less willing to make herself small. But the threats Lester had warned about were real. Twice, wolves from rival packs had tried to get close to her. Both times, Mark's guards had intervened, but the message was clear. She was a target now. The council was another problem. They'd called a formal meeting to discuss Mark's claim, and the atmosphere had been hostile from the start. Renee had stood beside Mark's throne, trying to look calm while 12 alphas argued about whether a human-blooded Omega was fit to be their king's mate. "She'll weaken our bloodlines," Alpha Thorn had said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your pups will be barely wolf, Your Majesty. Is that the legacy you want to leave?" Mark's response had been measured but firm. "My mate's bloodline is irrelevant. The bond between us is real, and it's recognized by the moon goddess herself. Any wolf who questions that is questioning the natural order we all claim to serve. The natural order puts strength above sentiment," Alpha Garrett had countered, "and she is not strong enough to stand beside you." That had been when Renee had spoken up, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "You're right. I'm not as strong as you. I'll never be. But strength isn't just about physical power. It's about resilience, about surviving in a world that tells you you're not enough, about choosing to stand when everything in you wants to run. She'd met each alpha's gaze, refusing to look away. I didn't ask for this bond, didn't ask to be noticed by your king, but I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. So you can either accept that, or you can waste your time trying to change something that's already done. The silence that followed had been absolute. Then Alpha Vera, the only female alpha on the council, smiled slowly. She has fire, Your Majesty, more than I expected. Perhaps there's hope for this match after all. It hadn't won over everyone, but it had been a start. And as the meeting had adjourned, Mark had taken her hand and squeezed it gently, pride evident in his expression. But victories in the palace were always temporary, because 3 weeks after the council meeting, everything fell apart. Renee had been in the training yard when one of the younger wolves collapsed. She'd run to help, pressing her hands against the wound in his side, trying to stop the bleeding. It looked like a training accident at first, but then 2 more wolves went down, and the guards started shouting about poison. Mark had been in a meeting with Border Patrol commanders. By the time he'd reached the yard, 4 wolves were dead, and Renee was covered in blood, her hands shaking as healers worked frantically around her. "It was meant for you," he'd said later in his chambers, after she'd been cleared by the healers. "The poison. Someone laced the water supply in the training yard. You weren't supposed to be there today." "But I was." "But you were." His hands had been shaking as he'd cupped her face. "You could have died, Renee, if you'd drunk any of that water." "But I didn't. I'm okay. This time. But what about next time?" The anguish in his voice had broken something in her chest. "Lester was right. Being with me is going to get you killed." Renee had grabbed his hands, forced him to look at her. "Being without you will kill me faster, because if I leave, if I go back to being invisible and alone, I'll just be surviving, not living. And I'm tired of just surviving, Mark. I want to live. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's scary, I want to live with you." The kiss he'd given her then had been desperate, claiming. A promise and a plea wrapped into one. And for the first time since he'd claimed her, Renee had let herself fully accept what the bond between them meant. Not just protection or duty or attraction, but love. Complicated and terrifying and absolutely real. "I love you," she'd whispered against his mouth. "I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I do. I love you." Mark had pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and the emotion in his gaze had been overwhelming. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you, since you pressed yourself against that wall trying to be invisible, and all I wanted was to make you see yourself the way I see you. Brave, beautiful, perfect." They'd fallen into bed then, the bond between them finally completing in a tangle of heat and need and absolute trust. And in the aftermath, wrapped in each other, Renee had let herself believe that maybe they could actually make this work. She'd been wrong. The truth about the poison came 3 days later. It hadn't been a rival pack. It had been Lester, Mark's own brother, working with a faction of the council who wanted to see Renee removed and Mark forced into a more politically advantageous match. The evidence was damning. Financial records showing payments from Lester to the wolf who'd laced the water. Correspondence between Lester and 3 council members discussing how to eliminate what they called the Omega problem, and a confession from one of the conspirators that detailed the entire plan. Mark had spent weeks having Lester followed, suspicious of his brother's extended stay, and growing certain that Lester's interest in Renee wasn't as altruistic as he'd claimed. And when the evidence had come together, Mark had acted swiftly. Now, Lester was in the Great Hall, hands bound, guards on either side, facing his brother across the stone floor. The entire court was assembled, because what happened next would define Mark's reign. "You tried to kill my mate," Mark said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Your own blood, all for a throne you were never going to inherit." Lester's expression was defiant. I tried to save you from yourself. That Omega is making you weak, Mark. The Council sees it. The Packs see it. You're so consumed with protecting her that you're neglecting your duties. How many border skirmishes have escalated because you were too distracted? How many pack disputes have gone unresolved because you were playing house with a maid? My duties have never been neglected. Haven't they? You've spent more time in the last month training her than leading your kingdom. You've made enemies of half the council by forcing them to accept her. And you've put a target on our entire family because every rival pack knows that she's your weakness. Lester's voice rose. I did this for you, brother, to free you from a bond that's destroying you. You did this for yourself, because you've always wanted what I have. And you thought removing Renee would give you an opening to challenge me. Someone needs to challenge you. You're not the alpha this kingdom needs anymore. The hall erupted in murmurs. Mark held up a hand for silence, and the room obeyed instantly. His presence commanded that kind of respect, that kind of power. And watching him, Renee understood why Lester had been so desperate to undermine him. Because Mark was everything an alpha king should be. Strong, just worthy of loyalty. The punishment for attempting to kill an alpha's mate is death, Mark said quietly. Our laws are clear. You knew the risk when you made your move. Lester's defiance cracked. So you'll kill me? Your own brother? You stopped being my brother the moment you put Renee in danger. Mark's eyes were cold. But I won't kill you. Because Renee asked me not to. Because she believes mercy is strength, and I've learned to trust her judgment. So instead, I'm exiling you. You'll be stripped of your title, your lands, your pack, and you'll leave our territory before dawn. If you ever return, if I ever hear that you've spoken my name or Renee's, I will hunt you down myself, and I won't show mercy a second time. The sentence was harsh, but fair. Lester's shoulders sagged as the weight of it settled over him. Without his title, he was nothing. Just another lone wolf with no pack and no purpose. As the guards led Lester away, his eyes found Renee's one last time. And there was something in his gaze that looked almost like regret. Like maybe, in some twisted way, he really had believed he was helping Mark. But it was too late for regrets. I need you to stay with me here. Because what comes next changes everything we thought we knew about Renee. If you're interested in this story, if you want to see how they rebuild after this betrayal, and what secrets are about to surface, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that notification bell. Because the aftermath of Lester's exile brings a revelation that'll turn Renee's entire world upside down. And I promise you, you don't want to miss it. The palace felt different after Lester's exile. Quieter. But for Renee and Mark, it was also a new beginning. A chance to build something real, now that the immediate danger had passed. Mark had been teaching her the finer points of pack leadership, taking her to border settlements so she could see how the kingdom functioned beyond the palace walls. And everywhere they went, Renee saw wolves who respected Mark but were uncertain about her. She didn't blame them. She was still learning. It was during one of these trips, to a small village on the eastern border, that everything changed. They'd been staying with the local pack alpha, a kind older woman named Nora, who'd welcomed them warmly. Renee had been helping in the communal kitchen when Nora had paused, staring at her with an odd expression. Your eyes, Nora had said softly. That particular shade of green. I've only seen it once before. Renee had tensed. What do you mean? There was a woman, maybe 25 years ago. She passed through our village fleeing from something. Wouldn't say what. But she was pregnant and scared. And she had eyes exactly like yours. Nora's brow furrowed. She stayed with us for a few weeks, just long enough to have her baby. A girl. Then she left the pup with us and disappeared. Said she couldn't keep her safe if they stayed together. The world had tilted. Renee's voice came out hoarse. What happened to the baby? We raised her as part of the pack. Named her Renee after the woman's grandmother. She was a sweet child, quiet, always trying to be invisible. Nora's eyes widened. By the goddess! You're her, aren't you? You're that baby! Renee couldn't breathe. Her entire life, she'd believed her parents were dead, believed she was alone in the world. But if Nora was telling the truth, why didn't anyone tell me? We thought it was kinder. You were only a few days old when your mother left. We figured if she wanted you to know the truth, she would have come back for you. But she never did. Nora's expression was gentle. I'm sorry, child. I should have told you years ago. Mark had appeared in the doorway then, taking one look at Renee's face and crossing to her immediately. What happened? Renee had explained, her voice shaking, and Mark had held her as the implications sank in. Because if her mother had been running from something, if she'd given Renee up to keep her safe, then there was a history there that Renee knew nothing about. The investigation that followed had been swift. Mark had called in favors, tracked down records, pieced together a story that made Renee's head spin. Her mother hadn't been human, as she'd always believed. She'd been wolf, from a powerful bloodline that had been wiped out in a pack war before Renee was born. And Renee's father hadn't been a low-ranking wolf. He'd been an alpha, one who'd been killed by rivals who'd wanted his territory. Which meant Renee wasn't an omega at all. She was alpha-born. Her bloodline was strong, her heritage significant, and the only reason she'd presented as omega was because she'd been raised to believe she was weak. Raised to hide. And her wolf had adapted, becoming small and quiet to match the life she'd thought she was supposed to live. You've been suppressing yourself your entire life, Mark had explained, his hands gentle on her shoulders as they stood in his study, surrounded by the documents that proved her lineage. Your wolf has been dormant, waiting for you to claim your strength. But now that you know the truth, everything can change. I don't know how to be strong, Renee had whispered. I've spent my whole life being invisible. Then I'll teach you. We'll do it together. Mark's smile had been soft. You were never just a maid, Renee. You were always meant for more, and now you get to decide what that looks like. The transformation hadn't been immediate, but over the following weeks, as Renee trained harder and pushed herself further, she'd felt her wolf waking up, felt strength she'd never known she possessed rising to the surface, and the first time she'd shifted fully, felt her bones reshape and her senses sharpen, she'd understood what Mark had been trying to tell her. She wasn't weak. She'd never been weak. She'd just been sleeping. The council's next meeting had been very different from the first, because when Alpha Thorn had made another disparaging comment about her bloodline, Renee hadn't stayed silent. She'd stood, let her alpha presence fill the room, and watched with satisfaction as every wolf there had felt the power radiating off her. My bloodline, she'd said calmly, includes 3 generations of alphas before my father. My mother was from the Northern Highland Pack, one of the oldest and most respected lines in our history. I am not weak. I am not unworthy. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And if anyone in this room still has a problem with that, they can challenge me directly instead of hiding behind polite politics. No one had challenged her. Not that day. Not ever. Because Renee had finally become what she was always meant to be. Not just an alpha's mate, but an alpha herself. Equal to Mark in power, if not in experience. A queen in her own right. The coronation took place 3 months after Lester's exile. It was a formal affair, witnessed by every pack in the kingdom, where Mark officially named Renee as his queen and co-ruler. She wore a dress of silver and white, her hair crowned with moonflowers, and when Mark placed the ceremonial band on her wrist, the mark of an alpha queen, the bond between them had flared so bright that every wolf in the Great Hall had felt it. You're mine, Mark had whispered as they stood before the assembled packs. And I'm yours, for as long as we both live. Longer, Renee had replied. Even death won't break what we've built. The celebration that followed had been joyous. the kind of revelry that came from witnessing something rare and precious. Two alphas finding each other and choosing to rule together instead of competing for dominance. It wasn't common, wasn't even particularly safe, because two alphas sharing power could easily descend into conflict. But Mark and Renee had something different, something stronger. They had trust, had love, had a bond that made them better together than they could ever be apart. But as the night wore on, as Renee stood on the balcony overlooking the mountains with Mark's arm around her waist, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that there were more challenges coming. "What are you thinking?" Mark asked, his voice soft against her ear. "That this is too good to last. That something's going to try to tear us apart." "Probably." He turned her to face him, his eyes serious. "There will always be wolves who want what we have, who see our bond as something to exploit or destroy. But we're stronger than they are, Renee. We've already survived assassination attempts and exile and political manipulation. We can survive whatever comes next. Together? Always together." He kissed her then. Slow and deep, a promise and a claiming and a celebration all at once. And when they finally pulled apart, Renee let herself believe it. Let herself trust that the love between them was strong enough to weather any storm. Because that's what love was, in the end. Not the absence of conflict or danger, but the choice to stand together in the face of it, to fight for each other and for the life they were building. And Renee had spent her whole life running from conflict, hiding from danger, trying to be invisible. She was done running, done hiding. She was an alpha queen now, and whatever came next, she'd face it head on. With Mark beside her, with her pack behind her, with a strength she'd finally learned to claim. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Renee wasn't afraid of it. Because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. Months passed. The kingdom settled into a new rhythm with Renee as queen. She'd proven herself again and again, mediating disputes, leading border patrols, earning the respect of even the most skeptical wolves. And her relationship with Mark had only deepened, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they faced together. But there were still nights when she woke from nightmares. Still moments when she remembered what it felt like to be powerless. And on those nights, Mark would hold her and remind her that she was never going back to that life. That she was safe, protected, loved. It was on one of those nights, wrapped in Mark's arms, that Renee finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Do you think my mother is still alive?" Mark was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. We've searched. But if she's been hiding for 25 years, she's very good at it. I want to find her. I want to know why she left me. Why she thought I'd be safer without her. Then we'll find her, together. We'll search every corner of this kingdom and beyond if we have to." He kissed her forehead. "Whatever you need, Renee. I'm with you." And that, more than anything, was what made their bond unbreakable. Not the mate connection, not the alpha power they shared, but the simple, profound choice to be there for each other, to support each other, to love each other through every difficult moment and every triumph. The search for Renee's mother would be long, difficult, full of dead ends and disappointments. But they'd face it the way they faced everything else, together. Because that's what it meant to be partners, to be mates, to be alphas, ruling side by side. And as Renee drifted back to sleep, Mark's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would survive it. Because they had each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. So that's Renee's story. From invisible maid to alpha queen. From believing she was weak to claiming the strength that was always inside her. And through it all, Mark stood beside her. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Every single day. If this story moved you, if you felt Renee's journey in your bones, subscribe to Oliviera Werewolf Tales, because there are so many more stories like this waiting. Stories of wolves.